My mother-in-law always knew where I was, until I discovered the GPS tracker she had hidden in my purse. If you enjoy this story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life drama every week. I never thought privacy would become such a precious commodity in my marriage. When I first met James 3 years ago at a coffee shop in downtown Boston, he was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in everything about me. Our whirlwind romance led to a proposal 6 months later, and I was over the moon. What I didn't account for was his mother, Patricia. Patricia Winters was the epitome of what you'd call an overbearing mother-in-law, though I didn't see it at first. She lived just 20 minutes away from our apartment in Cambridge, close enough to drop by whenever she pleased. During our first year of marriage, these visits seemed harmless, bringing homemade cookies, offering to help with laundry, or simply checking in. James always welcomed her with open arms, saying, "Mom just wants to be involved in our lives, Violet. She means well." I wanted to believe him. I really did. My own parents lived across the country in Oregon, and I thought having family nearby might be nice. But over time, Patricia's involvement began to feel suffocating. "Oh, I saw you were at that new restaurant on Newbury Street yesterday," she mentioned casually during Sunday dinner at her house. "How was it?" I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "How did you know we went there?" "James told me," she replied smoothly, but when I glanced at my husband, his expression was just as confused as mine. "I didn't mention that to you, Mom," he said. Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "Well, someone must have told me. Maybe I saw it on Facebook. Except I hadn't posted anything about it. And neither had James." That was the first red flag, but certainly not the last. Patricia seemed to have an uncanny knowledge of my whereabouts. She'd call just as I was leaving work, saying she was in the neighborhood and wanted to meet for coffee. She'd mention errands I'd run or places I'd visited, always with a plausible explanation for how she knew. "The world is smaller than you think, Violet," she'd say with that tight smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Especially in a city like Boston." I tried to discuss it with James, but he thought I was being paranoid. "Mom's lived here her entire life. She knows everyone. Someone probably just mentioned seeing you," he'd say before changing the subject. But the coincidences kept piling up, and my anxiety grew with each one. I started to feel watched, monitored, like I couldn't move freely in my own life. I began changing my routines, taking different routes home from work, visiting stores I'd never been to before. I even started checking my phone for tracking apps, though I found nothing suspicious. My breaking point came on a Tuesday in April. I had called in sick to work, something I rarely did, because I needed a mental health day. I hadn't told anyone about my plans, not even James. I decided to treat myself to breakfast at a small cafe in Somerville, an area Patricia never visited. I was halfway through my avocado toast when my phone rang. "Violet, darling, are you feeling any better?" Patricia's sickly sweet voice came through the speaker. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. "What do you mean?" "James mentioned you were homesick today. I thought I'd bring you some of my chicken soup. I'm actually not far from your apartment now." My heart dropped. "I'm not at home, Patricia." There was a pause. "Oh? Where are you then? You should be resting if you're ill." The controlled curiosity in her voice made my skin crawl. I made up a quick excuse about picking up medicine and ended the call. As I sat there, my hands trembling slightly, I realized I needed answers. This wasn't coincidence or small world syndrome. Patricia was tracking me somehow. The question was, how? I paid for my breakfast and headed home, my mind racing through possibilities. I checked my phone again for unfamiliar apps or settings, but found nothing. I examined my car briefly, looking for anything unusual, but it was clean. I even went through my wallet, credit cards, and other personal items. Then, as I was emptying my purse onto our bed, I noticed something strange about the inner lining of my favorite leather handbag, the one I used almost every day. There was a small, almost imperceptible bulge in the corner seam. I might never have noticed it if I hadn't been specifically looking for something out of place. With trembling fingers, I carefully tore open the stitching and reached inside. What I pulled out made my blood run cold. A small black device, no bigger than a quarter, with a tiny blinking light. I didn't need to be a tech expert to recognize a GPS tracker when I saw one. In that moment, the violation I felt was overwhelming. Someone, and I knew exactly who, had been monitoring my every move for who knows how long. The privacy I thought I had was an illusion. And worse, my husband's mother was the one who had shattered it. I sat on the edge of the bed, the tracker clutched in my palm, and tried to figure out what to do next. Confront Patricia? Tell James? Throw the thing in the Charles River and pretend I never found it? The walls of our apartment suddenly felt too close, too confining, as if they too were watching me. One thing was clear. Nothing in my relationship with Patricia, or James, would ever be the same again. The GPS tracker sat on our kitchen counter like a small black stain, impossible to ignore. I had spent the afternoon researching it online, discovering it was a relatively inexpensive model that could be purchased on any number of websites. It had a battery life of about 2 weeks and connected to an app that would show my real-time location to whoever was monitoring it. I paced our apartment, rehearsing what I would say to James when he got home. Part of me wanted to believe there was some innocent explanation, but I couldn't imagine one. There was no scenario where secretly tracking your daughter-in-law was acceptable behavior. When I heard his key in the lock, my heart started pounding. James walked in, loosening his tie, his face lighting up when he saw me. "Hey, you're up. Feeling better?" He moved to kiss me but stopped short when he saw my expression. "What's wrong?" I pointed to the counter. "I found that in my purse today. Someone's been tracking my movements." James picked up the device, examining it with a furrowed brow. "What is this exactly?" "It's a GPS tracker, James. Someone put it in my purse to monitor where I go." He looked up at me, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. "And you think my mother did this?" The defensive note in his voice made my stomach clench. "Who else would it be? She always knows where I am. She called me today knowing I wasn't at work. She's shown up coincidentally too many times." James set the tracker down and ran a hand through his hair. "Vi, this is a serious accusation. My mom can be a bit much sometimes, but she wouldn't do something like this." "Then how do you explain it? How does she always know my whereabouts? Even places I never mentioned to anyone? Maybe someone at work? Or—" "Stop it," I interrupted, my voice rising. "Stop making excuses for her. Your mother has been invading my privacy for months, and you've been dismissing my concerns every step of the way." James's face hardened. "So you tear apart your purse and find this thing, and immediately decide my mother is stalking you? Without any actual proof?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "What more proof do you need? The constant coincidental meetings? The way she knows about places I've been that I never mentioned? And now this? This could have been placed by anyone. A creepy coworker, someone at the gym. But it wasn't," I said, my voice quieter now. "Deep down you know it was Patricia." James paced the kitchen, shaking his head. "I'm not going to stand here and listen to you accuse my mother of something this bizarre without solid evidence. She's been nothing but welcoming to you." His blind loyalty to his mother hurt more than the invasion of privacy. I had hoped he would be outraged on my behalf, ready to confront Patricia alongside me. Instead, he was defending her, making me feel crazy for even suggesting she was responsible. "Fine," I said, picking up the tracker. "Let's get your solid evidence. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to leave this exactly where I found it. And then we're going to see who comes looking for it." James looked uncomfortable but didn't object. "And how exactly do we do that?" "We tell your mother I'm going shopping tomorrow at the mall in Burlington. But instead, I'll leave my purse here and go somewhere else. If she shows up at the mall looking for me, we'll know." "This is ridiculous," James muttered. But I could see uncertainty creeping into his expression. "If I'm wrong, I'll apologize to both you and your mother," I promised. "But if I'm right, James, you need to be prepared to set some serious boundaries with her." He reluctantly agreed to my plan, though I could tell he was only doing it to prove me wrong. We called Patricia and mentioned casually that I was planning to spend the next day at the Burlington Mall, shopping for an upcoming friend's wedding. She expressed interest, asking what stores I planned to visit and what time I'd be there. That night, as we lay in bed with a palpable tension between us, I wondered if our marriage was strong enough to survive what was coming, because deep in my gut, I knew tomorrow would confirm my suspicions. And then James would have to make a choice between his wife and his mother. Morning came, and I carefully placed my purse with the tracker on our coffee table before heading out. Instead of the Burlington Mall, I went to a small bookstore in Cambridge that I'd never visited before. I spent a few hours browsing, trying to distract myself from the anxiety of what might be happening elsewhere. Around noon, my phone rang. It was James. "She's here," he said, his voice tight. "At the mall. She called me asking if I knew which store you were in because she can't find you." A wave of vindication washed over me, followed quickly by sadness. "What did you tell her?" "I said I wasn't sure. Violet, He trailed off. "I don't know what to say. Tell her you'll help her look. Keep her there. I'm coming now." I drove to the Burlington Mall with a strange calm. The uncertainty was gone. Now I knew for sure, and there was an odd relief in that. When I arrived, I texted James to find out where they were. He directed me to the food court. As I approached, I saw them sitting at a table, James looking deeply uncomfortable, Patricia with a concerned expression that didn't quite mask her frustration. She spotted me first, her eyes widening slightly. "Violet, there you are. We've been looking all over for you." I sat down across from her, placing my phone on the table. "Have you? That's interesting because I never said exactly when I'd be here. In fact, I only arrived a few minutes ago." "Well, I was just in the area and thought I'd surprise you," she said smoothly. "When I couldn't find you, I called James." "Patricia," I said, keeping my voice steady. "How did you know I was supposed to be here at all?" "James mentioned it when we spoke yesterday." I looked at James, who cleared his throat. "Actually, Mom, Violet was the one who talked to you last night." Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "Well, one of you did. My point is, I knew you were shopping today. And you just happened to be looking for me in this exact mall at the exact time I mentioned?" Her smile faltered slightly. "What are you implying, Violet?" I reached into my bag and pulled out the GPS tracker, placing it on the table between us. "I found this in my purse yesterday. Someone has been tracking my movements for weeks, maybe months." Patricia's face drained of color. She glanced at James, who was staring at her with a mixture of disbelief and disappointment. "I don't know what that is," she said, her voice higher than usual. "It's a GPS tracker," I replied. "And I think you know exactly what it is, because you put it there." "This is absurd." "James, are you going to let her accuse me like this?" James looked at his mother, and I saw something shift in his expression. "How did you know Violet called in sick yesterday, Mom? I never told you that." Patricia's mouth opened and closed, like a fish out of water. I don't remember. Someone must have mentioned it. And all those times you just happened to run into Violet? All those places you knew she'd visited without her telling you?" James pressed. "I don't have to sit here and be interrogated," Patricia snapped, gathering her purse. "If you two want to concoct some bizarre conspiracy theory about me, that's your business." As she stood to leave, James reached out and gently caught her wrist. "Mom, please. If you did this, we need to talk about it. This isn't healthy." For a moment, I thought she might confess. There was a flicker of something, shame, perhaps, in her eyes. But then her jaw set stubbornly. "I have nothing to say to either of you," she said coldly, pulling away from James's grasp. "Call me when you're ready to apologize." We watched her storm off, her heels clicking aggressively against the tile floor. An uncomfortable silence fell between us. "I'm sorry," James finally said. "I should have believed you." I reached across the table and took his hand. "She's your mother. You wanted to think the best of her. What do we do now?" I squeezed his hand. "Now we set boundaries. Real ones. And if she can't respect them..." I left the sentence unfinished, knowing we both understood the implications. As we left the mall, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The tracker was discovered, Patricia's actions exposed. But I also knew this was just the beginning of what would likely be a difficult journey for our marriage. The days following our confrontation with Patricia were tense. James tried calling her multiple times, but she refused to answer. When he finally drove to her house, she only cracked the door open, told him she wasn't feeling well, and asked him to come back another time. It was classic Patricia, avoiding difficult conversations by any means necessary. Meanwhile, James and I were having plenty of difficult conversations of our own. The GPS incident had opened a floodgate of discussions about his mother's behavior over the years, his enabling of it, and what our relationship with her would look like moving forward. "I just don't understand why she would do something like this," James said one evening as we sat on our balcony, watching the sunset over the Cambridge skyline. "It's not like she's ever been suspicious of you or thought you were a bad influence on me." I took a sip of my wine. "I don't think it's about me specifically, James. I think it's about control. She's had complete access to every aspect of your life since you were born. Then I came along, and suddenly there was a part of your life she couldn't monitor or influence." He nodded slowly. "She's always been overprotective. After my dad died, it got worse. But this goes way beyond overprotective. It's obsessive," I agreed. "And unhealthy. For her, for you, for us. So what do we do? Cut her out completely?" The pain in his voice was evident. "No," I said, reaching for his hand. "She's your mother, and despite everything, I know you love her. But we need firm boundaries, and she needs to acknowledge what she did and why it was wrong." A week after the mall incident, Patricia finally agreed to meet with us. We suggested neutral territory, a quiet cafe halfway between our apartment and her house. James and I arrived first, claiming a corner table where we could speak privately. When Patricia walked in, I was struck by how small she looked. Usually impeccably put together, she seemed disheveled, with dark circles under her eyes and her normally perfect hair looking flat and lifeless. As she approached our table, I could see her hands trembling slightly. "Thank you for coming, Mom," James said, standing to pull out a chair for her. She nodded, sitting down without making eye contact with either of us. A heavy silence fell over the table. "I think we need to talk about what happened," I finally said. Patricia's eyes flicked up to mine, then away again. "I suppose you want an apology." "What I want is an explanation," I replied. "Why would you put a tracker in my purse? Why would you violate my privacy that way?" She remained silent for so long that I thought she might not answer. Then, almost inaudibly, she said, "I was afraid." James leaned forward. "Afraid of what, Mom?" "Of losing you." Her voice cracked slightly. "When your father died, you were all I had left. For 20 years, it was just the two of us. Then Violet came along, and suddenly, you were pulling away." "I wasn't pulling away," James protested. "I was starting my own life, my own family." "It felt like pulling away to me," Patricia insisted. "You stopped calling every day. You missed Sunday dinners sometimes. You made decisions without asking my opinion." I tried to keep the incredulity out of my voice. "Patricia, that's what adults do. They build their own lives." She shot me a look that contained a flash of the old Patricia, sharp and defensive. "You wouldn't understand. You don't have children." "Mom," James said, a warning note in his voice. Patricia deflated slightly. "I'm sorry. That was unfair." She twisted her wedding ring, which she still wore 16 years after her husband's death. "After James's father died, I promised myself I would never be blindsided like that again. I needed to know where you were, that you were safe. So you extended that to me?" I asked. "You're his wife. What affects you affects him." She paused. "And yes, I was curious about your life, about what you did when James wasn't around. I wanted to know if you were suitable." "Suitable?" James echoed. "For my son, for the life I wanted for him." She looked directly at me for the first time. "I didn't trust that you had his best interests at heart." The admission stung. but at least it was honest. And did spying on me for months change your opinion? A flush crept up her neck. I wasn't spying. I was monitoring. You were tracking my movements without my knowledge or consent, I corrected her. That's the definition of spying. Fine, she snapped. Yes, it changed my opinion. You never went anywhere suspicious. You never met with anyone inappropriate. You were exactly who you appeared to be. Her tone suggested this discovery had been somewhat disappointing. James ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I knew well. Mom, do you understand why what you did was wrong? Patricia looked down at her untouched coffee. I understand that it upset Violet. It's not just that it upset me, I said. It was a violation of my privacy and my trust. It was illegal. And it demonstrated a fundamental lack of respect for me as a person and for your son's choice of partner. She flinched at the word illegal, but didn't deny it. The thing is, Patricia, I continued, if you had simply made an effort to get to know me, really know me, not just monitor my movements, you might have discovered that I genuinely love your son and want what's best for him, just like you do. I do know that, she said quietly. I see how happy he is with you. I didn't know how to let go. James reached across the table and took his mother's hand. Mom, I will always be your son. Nothing will change that. But I'm also Violet's husband, and we're building a life together. You need to respect that. Tears filled Patricia's eyes. I'm sorry. To both of you. What I did was wrong. I was so afraid of being left behind that I didn't realize I was pushing you away. It was the most vulnerable I'd ever seen her, and despite everything, I felt a twinge of sympathy. Fear could make people do terrible things. We're not cutting you out of our lives, I assured her. But things need to change. We need boundaries that you respect. She nodded, wiping at her eyes. I understand. And we think it might be good for you to talk to someone. James added gently, a professional, about Dad and about letting go. I expected her to resist, but she surprised me. Maybe you're right. I know I haven't been handling things well. As our conversation continued, we outlined what healthy boundaries would look like. Calling before visiting, respecting our privacy, treating me as James's partner rather than a competitor. Patricia listened, occasionally nodding, occasionally pushing back. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start. When we parted ways, Patricia hugged James tightly, then turned to me with uncertainty. I hesitated only briefly before stepping forward to embrace her. It was stiff and awkward, but it was something. As we watched her walk to her car, James put his arm around my shoulders. Think she meant it? About changing? I think she wants to, I replied. Whether she can is another question. Change isn't easy, especially at her age. Thank you for being willing to work through this, he said. A lot of people would have just written her off. I leaned into him. She's family. Complicated, boundary-crossing family, but still family. We went home cautiously optimistic, knowing the road ahead would have its challenges, but hoping we had at least started moving in the right direction. 6 months passed, and true to her word, Patricia began seeing a therapist. The changes were subtle at first. She would catch herself before asking intrusive questions, or she'd apologize when she overstepped. There were setbacks, of course. Old habits die hard, and Patricia had decades of controlling behavior to unlearn. The real test came when James and I announced we were moving to Seattle for my new job opportunity. I had been offered a position at a tech company that was too good to pass up, and after much discussion, James agreed he could transfer to his company's West Coast office. We invited Patricia over for dinner to break the news. I prepared her favorite meal, pot roast with roasted vegetables, hoping it might soften the blow. As we ate, James and I exchanged nervous glances, waiting for the right moment. Mom, James finally said, setting down his fork, Violet and I have some news. Patricia looked between us, her expression immediately apprehensive. You're not pregnant, are you? I laughed despite myself. No, not yet. It's about my career, actually. I've been offered a senior position at Nexus Technologies in Seattle, I explained. It's an incredible opportunity with better pay, more responsibility, and a chance to work on projects I'm passionate about. Patricia's fork clattered against her plate. Seattle? But that's across the country. James nodded. Yes, it is. And we've decided to accept the offer. I can transfer to my company's office there. But your whole life is here, Patricia protested. Your friends, your home, me. The old Patricia would have made this entirely about herself, but I could see her fighting that impulse. She took a deep breath and added, I mean, I'll miss you both terribly, but I understand this is a great opportunity for Violet. James and I exchanged surprised glances. This was not the reaction we had expected. We'll visit often, I assured her. And you're welcome to come stay with us any time. I meant it too. The distance would actually make it easier to manage boundaries. When will you leave? She asked, her voice small. End of next month, James said. The company is helping with relocation costs, and they need Violet to start by December. Patricia nodded, visibly processing this information. Well, that gives us some time to prepare. And I've always wanted to see the Pacific Northwest. She attempted a smile. Maybe this is a good thing. A fresh start for all of us. Later, as we cleared the dishes, Patricia pulled me aside in the kitchen. I want you to know I'm genuinely happy for you, Violet, she said. This job sounds perfect for you. And while I'm sad you'll be so far away, I'm trying to see it as an opportunity rather than a loss. I studied her face, looking for signs of the manipulative Patricia I'd come to know. But all I saw was a woman genuinely trying to be better. Thank you, I said. That means a lot to me. My therapist says I need to practice letting go with love, she continued, a hint of embarrassment coloring her cheeks. It sounds like self-help nonsense, but she might have a point. I smiled. It's not nonsense. It's exactly what you're doing right now. As the weeks passed and our move approached, Patricia surprised us again by being genuinely helpful. She helped us sort through our belongings, connected us with a friend who had connections to a real estate agent in Seattle, and even researched the best neighborhoods for young professionals. There were moments when the old Patricia surfaced, like when she suggested we look at homes near airports to make it easier for her to visit. But overall, she was supportive. The night before we left, she hosted a small going-away dinner at her house. She had invited a few of our closest friends and prepared all our favorite dishes. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Patricia handed me a small wrapped package. A going-away present, she explained. Open it now if you like. Inside was a beautiful leather-bound journal with my initials embossed on the cover. I thought you could document your new adventure, she said, and maybe send me the occasional update. It's beautiful, I said, genuinely touched. Thank you. There's something else, she added, reaching into her pocket. She pulled out a familiar small black object and placed it on the table between us. The GPS tracker. I kept it, she admitted, as a reminder of how badly I damaged your trust. I'm giving it to you now as a promise that I'll never do anything like that again. I stared at the tracker, then at Patricia. The gesture was symbolic, but powerful. She was acknowledging her wrongdoing and making a commitment to change. I appreciate that, I said, picking up the tracker. I think I'll dispose of this properly now. Together, we walked outside to her driveway. I placed the tracker on the ground, and with a satisfying crunch, smashed it under my heel. Patricia watched, a mix of emotions playing across her face. Feels good, doesn't it? She said with a small smile. Surprisingly, yes, I admitted. The next morning, Patricia came to help us load the last of our boxes into the moving truck. As we prepared to say our goodbyes, she handed James an envelope. Open it when you get to Seattle, she instructed. Finally, it was time to leave. The three of us stood awkwardly by our packed car, the moment heavy with emotion. I'm going to miss you both so much, Patricia said, her voice thick. We'll call as soon as we arrive, James promised, pulling his mother into a tight hug. When it was my turn, Patricia embraced me with surprising warmth. Take care of each other, she whispered. We will, I promised. And you take care of yourself. As we pulled away, I watched Patricia in the rearview mirror, standing alone in the driveway, waving until we turned the corner and she disappeared from view. "You okay?" James asked, reaching for my hand. "Yeah," I said, squeezing his fingers. "I think we all are." A week later, settled into our temporary apartment in Seattle, James finally opened the envelope his mother had given him. Inside was a check for a substantial amount, "toward a down payment on your new home," the note read, "and 2 round-trip plane tickets to Boston for Christmas." "She's really trying," James said, showing me the contents. "Yes, she is," I agreed. "And so are we." That night, as rain tapped gently against our windows, a sound we were quickly becoming accustomed to in Seattle, I pulled out the journal Patricia had given me and began to write. I wrote about our journey, both physical and emotional, about betrayal and forgiveness, about boundaries and growth. And as I wrote, I realized that what had started as one of the most invasive violations of my privacy had ultimately led to something unexpected: a healthier relationship with my mother-in-law, a stronger marriage, and a new beginning in a city across the country. Sometimes, the things that threaten to break us are exactly what we need to rebuild something better. My mother-in-law had always known where I was, until I discovered the GPS tracker she had hidden in my purse, and in discovering it, I found a path toward healing that none of us could have anticipated.